back that bitch, pop him like a cyst, Glock with the assist. It also consisted of a song wherein Mr. Williams sang or rapped the lyrics, hey, this is that slime shit, that YsL shit, killing 12 shit, fuck a jail shit. I'm in the VIP, I got the pistol on my hip, fuck the police. You praying that you live, I'm praying that I hit, this that slime shit. 100 rounds in a Tahoe, I'm prepared to take them down. Got banana clips for all these ends acting monkey. This is that slime shit, this is that mob shit. Fuck the judge, YsL, this that mob life. Defendant Williams released a video on YouTube of a song wherein he states, I shot at his mommy, now he no longer mentions me. Act like you want war and they gonna smoke you like a blunt. Another song, I escaped every one of the licks because I was supposed to be rich. I don't care nothing about a cop. I'm just telling you how it is. I done did the robbing, I done did the jacking, now I'm full rapping. Gave the lawyer close to $2 million, he handles all the killing. We don't speak about shit on wax, it's all my business. We know to kill the biggest cats of all kittens. In another song, I was on Cleveland, stuck like a magnet, bitch ass N-word, pay for that casket, that's just if we whack 'em. In yet another song, Defendant Williams raps, red just like Elmo, but I never fucking giggle, YsL won't fold. Pick his ass off from the balcony, wipe an end's nose. I'm gonna F for the cash, then she getting robbed by Tick, a reference to Trontavia Stevens. All I ever wanted was the money, put your hands in the air if you dare. F and N, put him in a wheelchair. And even later on, Mr. Williams, and I believe that this was in 2019, made a post to YFN Lucci or Rayshawn Bennett. If I ain't like what you do for your mother and kids, I would have been killed you. And in yet another song entitled Anybody, Defendant Williams stated, I never killed anybody, but I got something to do with that body. I got the streets on my back, carry it like I'm moving a body. I told them to shoot 100 rounds like he trying to movie the body. Ready for war like I'm Russia. I get all types of cash, I'm a general. As Mr. Williams' prominence in the music industry rose, his ascension within or in leadership in the gang YsL became more apparent as he rapped and talked about the crimes that YsL co-conspirators and members committed and how he got away with robberies. With respect to the Donovan Thomas murder, the court has heard evidence through phone records that within 6 minutes of the shooting of Donovan Thomas Jr., a phone call was made from Demise McMullen's cell phone to defendant Williams' phone. And then immediately after that call, Mr. Williams calls his sister Dora Greer and then calls Kelvin Treadwell. There is then a series of calls between Dora Greer and Treadwell, and then Treadwell calls Demise McMullen or Nard. All of those calls happen within 15 minutes of the 911 call. And as I have stated before, the court has heard accomplice prior inconsistent statements about who committed the murder itself and what happened afterwards. The conflict between YsL and members of If Gang continued into 2019, wherein Mr. Williams raps the lyrics that I referred to earlier. In May 2019, a YsL member shot multiple times at a vehicle owned by Rayshawn Bennett, a black and red Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon. At the time was being driven by a Milton Howard Jr. It was after that incident, later in August 2019, that defendant Williams posted on his page the language, YFN, if I ain't like what you do for your mother and kids, I would have been killed you. The post was then deleted from his account. Through text messages of a co-conspirator, Marquavius Huey, there was communication between Mr. Huey and Mr. Williams, both in January and in September of 2020. On January 19th, 2020, Mr. Williams sent a flyer to Marquavius Huey with the performance location of Rayshawn Bennett, or YFN Lucci. And when he sent that, he sent it with the message, "Handle that tonight, SLAT, S-L-A-T-T. Mr. Huey responded, SLAT, S-L-A-T-T. On September 2nd, 2020, Mr. Huey sent a flyer to Mr. Williams with another performance location of YFN Lucci, and Mr. Williams responded, SLATty, that is S-L-A-T-T-Y, handle and stay very low. Mr. Huey responded, SLAT, and for show, F-A-S-H-O. I've been out the way and appreciate you for everything, my brother. Never about money with me. I'm built on loyalty. Mr. Williams responded, SLAT, handle that. I got you. Through text messages and on a separate occasion, Mr. Huey said and conveyed to Mr. Williams that he would sit down for any one of them, and I believe that to be a reference of going to jail. When Mr. Bennett was not killed in 2022, Jaden Myrick sought permission from defendant Williams to stab Mr. Bennett while Mr. Bennett resided with Mr. Myrick at the jail. Mr. Myrick reached out to co-indictee Khalif Adams, who reached out to co-indictee Demikion Garlington to get permission from Mr. Williams. Demikion Garlington was also involved in the back and forth shootings back in 2015. On February 9th, 2022, Rayshawn Bennett was stabbed by Jaden Myrick at the Fulton County Jail. And after that stabbing, Mr. Myrick reached out multiple times to Mr. Adams for some type of compensation for the stabbing. Mr. Adams reached out to Mr. Garlington about the payment for the completion. On February the 22nd, 2022, YsL co-conspirator and co-indictee Christian Eppinger called YsL co-conspirator Antonio Sumlin to get permission to finish what Mr. Myrick could not complete, that is the killing of Mr. Bennett. Mr. Eppinger asked for payment for a lawyer. However, these calls were intercepted and Mr. Bennett was relocated. In March 2022, information about the stabbing made the news, and shortly thereafter, a series of violent offenses occurred. On March 11, 2022, YsL associates Christian McMiller and Darius Ford were gunned down. Mr. McMiller is a childhood friend of Mr. Williams. Mr. Ford was also a friend of Mr. Williams. On March 12th, the day after, there was a shootout near the Cleveland Avenue area. A shooting by a YsL associate, Stephen Harris, in YFN territory occurred, and a YFN member was shot in the head. March 11th through March 14th, there were a number of social media posts going back and forth between members of YsL and YFN. One of them was a post by Shannon Stillwells. We ain't the only ones who ain't going to be crying, that's going to be crying. After a posting was made by Mr. Watts picturing him, Mr. Shamel Drinks, and Mr. Jasper Walters, on March 14th, 2022, after YsL members spotted Mr. Drinks at a gas station, Mr. Drinks was gunned down as he drove away from the gas station and waited at a red light. Later, Mr. Stillwell, Mr. Nichols, Mr. Garlington, and Mr. Farley were all charged with the murder. That is one of the acts that we are still and would anticipate the court seeing the evidence of during the course of this trial. After grand jury warrants were issued after this indictment for Mr. Williams and 27 other co-conspirators, following searches of phones, wiretaps, and other information that led police to understand the role that Mr. Williams played in the YsL street gang and enterprise. Mr. Williams' home, he was arrested at his home and a search warrant was executed inside his home. While at his home, a sale amounts of illegal narcotics, including those that he is charged with in this indictment, was found. Also found was the machine gun with which the defendant has been charged in this indictment. The gun had a switch. The narcotics included marijuana, codeine, and cocaine. And inside the home were also other guns besides the guns with the switch. The items were seized, and again, Mr. Williams was subsequently arrested, along with other YsL members at Mr. Williams' home. Your Honor, that is the evidence that I believe has been shown throughout the course of this trial and that the state would continue to show. There are several messages between Mr. Huey and Mr. Williams inside the cell phone one of the cell phones that were recovered from Mr. Huey. Besides the messages about tells Mr. Williams he has a new number. Mr. Huey asks Mr. Williams, hey, my brother, I'm fucked up. You ain't got nobody I can pull up on and have something in my pocket. Mr. Williams responds, slat, let me call BEO. Mr. Huey responding, slat, I need you, my brother. Mr. Huey saying, asking whether or not a lawyer was going to go and talk to another YsL associate, asking Mr. Williams to send him some money to pay his lawyer off. Mr. Williams asking Mr. Huey, who had been accused of armed robbery, what did he want? Mr. Huey responded with a number. Mr. Williams responded, "Slat." After Mr. Williams stole a star ring from one of the victims in the indictment, he asked Mr. Williams, "Do you have a star ring?" Mr. Williams said, "Yes." Mr. Huey said, "Slat, you can't cash out me $500 so I can make a payment to my lawyer." Mr. Williams responded, "Slat." Mr. Huey sent him his phone number. Mr. Williams assured him through his responses, Slat, that he would take care of them. Throughout Mr. Huey's phone, you see messages of this nature between Mr. Huey and Mr. Williams. The court, again, will hear that as this trial continues. The recommendation that the state previously made prior to us reaching this point was made with the hope that Mr. Williams would agree to certain special conditions of probation that we asked him to adhere to, and that he would take ownership and responsibility for being the leader of YsL. Given that those negotiations have broken down, we are asking that the court sentence Mr. Williams as we have asked earlier. And prior to the court imposing a sentence, we would ask that Ms. Shawana Edmonds, who is the mother of Mr. Thomas, be allowed an opportunity to make an impact statement. And that is all that we have, unless the court has questions.
Okay, well, given that Mr. Williams is not charged with the murder of Mr. Thomas, I don't think that that is applicable here.
I checked on that, Your Honor, with respect to count one. As a co-conspirator, Mr. Williams is responsible for all of the acts of the other co-conspirators, the overt acts. The overt act of the murder of Donovan Thomas is one of those acts.
I know, and this trial is not complete, and so y'all have not yet proven that. Not to mention that you dismissed the murder charge against one of the co-defendants who already pled. So,
not for that case, Your Honor. That was that was Mr. Drinks.
Okay.
We have not dismissed any.
All right. Well, if there is a conviction on the RICO or murder count following the close of this trial, that would be the appropriate time for the victim impact statement to be made. All right, Mr. Steele or Mr. Adams, does the defense want to put anything on the record? Obviously, you need to make a recommendation.
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Many of the statements made by the prosecutor we vehemently disagree with. The prosecutor misstated many pieces of evidence and then took liberty that that is the state's theory. Mr. Williams has tendered a nolo contendere plea to the RICO conspiracy count. And in that count, there are several overt acts. And the first one, Your Honor, deals with a traffic stop. It's on September 9th of 2013. And I won't go through every one because it might take a long time. But just for completeness for this, the court knows, Mr. Williams is driving a car. There is a dash cam video of the stop. The officer who testified at the trial 11 years later, the case was a gun was found under the passenger seat. Mr. Williams is not tied to the gun. He's not convicted of that. And the dash cam video that the officer said would have picked up sound as well as definitely video was never turned over to us, supposedly lost. Could not explain the loss. The armed robbery in another overt act of Mr. Dodson, D-O-D-S-O-N, has the following information. The state only, because we haven't called witnesses yet. So the state put up a man who said nothing except, "I don't recall." And then they put in his prior recorded jail calls. That man was taken, his name is Mr. Bean, B-E-A-N. He was taken to Grady Hospital, and he was spoken with by a detective. The state vehemently accused me of lying to the jury, that the man never went, Mr. Bean was never taken to Grady Hospital, and that somehow I planted on him to say something on a recording where he said the reason I implicated Jeffrey Williams is because the police told me that it would be easier for me. Then I had to go through the CAD reports and show that Mr. Bean was in fact taken to Grady Hospital, and Mr. Bean on recording told Detective Quinn, who of course told the truth. Yes, when I spoke to the detective previously, I did lie. Then what the state doesn't tell the jury is that there's another man in the car. He is shot at the scene. He's arrested. He pled guilty. His name is Fred Prethro, P-R-E-T-H-O. And Mr. Prethro is in the Georgia State Prison System, easy to find. Mr. Prethro was in Grady Hospital also, unfortunately suffering from a gunshot wound. And you can hear the medical equipment behind him. And Detective Williams came in and was recording the whole conversation and said how many people were in the car. And Mr. Prethro names the people: Adrian Bean, who's the gentleman I just said, himself, and Walter Murphy. Are you sure there weren't a fourth person in the car? No, the three of us. The state doesn't call that person. The state does call Detective Williams. So I wanted to ask and inquire on that. The state, to obstruct, if that's obstruction, asked the predecessor court to prohibit me from getting into the fact of any conversation that would have impeached another witness. It's fine. Fred Prethro's on my witness list as well as the detective, and I have the recordings. In addition to that, Walter Murphy gave a statement while in the hospital, and his statement is very interesting. It's two different police reports, signed the same date, which is September 11th of 2013, and on the first 7 lines of the police report, they're identical. Then all of a sudden, when it gets to, on the right-hand police report, it says Mr. Murphy stated that there were 3 people, I believe, I have to go back, in the vehicle. On the other police report, it states Mr. Murphy stated there were 4 people. There's no reason that they should be different. They're both signed the same. The state doesn't call that officer at all. I tried to ask Mr. Murphy about it. The state objects, and the predecessor judge sustained the objection. Mr. Williams was not involved in the Mr. Dotson. Miss Bennett, that was Mother's Day, May 12, 2013. She reports allegedly an armed robbery. The detective who testified here and investigated stated he never took out arrest warrants for Mr. Williams. And he wrote in his police report, Miss Bennett is not truthful. That is the case that the state is talking about. The state then, there was Brady evidence that they don't turn over, and we find out about it in court after they arrest Miss Bennett because they say she's not cooperating, and it comes out that she told the prosecution over and over again that this did not happen the way that she reported it, and she doesn't remember. As to Donovan Thomas, and Mr. Williams has nothing but empathy, sympathy, and sorrow. They were friends. It is a lie. What the prosecution has put before this jury is a lie. What happened here is the prosecution comes up with a theory because they need a motive, they think. I know you don't need a motive in reality to prove a murder case or any other case, but they wanted a motive. So they made it where Mr. Williams and a gentleman named Rich Homie Kwan, his name is Mr. Lamar, he's a performer, and Mr. Williams and Mr. Lamar were close. There are public documents, recordings, Mr. Lamar being interviewed almost every year, and then he talks about his time with this band or group called Rich Gang, and he says every year up to this past year, he, God forbid, died. We can't call him as a witness, how close he is to Mr. Williams. The state, though, made it in this case, or tried to make it, that Mr. Williams and Rich Homie Kwan are enemies because Rich Homie Kwan will not sign with a record label that has nothing to do with Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams doesn't sign to that record label. That record label is owned by a gentleman named Brian Williams, also goes by Birdman, wildly successful. He started Drake's career. He started Mr. Dwayne Carter, performer known as Lil Wayne's career. He started Nicki Minaj's career, just fabulous, powerful person, well-respected in the industry. But the state wants it to be that Donovan Thomas interceded. and would not let Rich Homie Quan sign to Mr. Brian Birdman Williams. And that is the reason that Jeffrey Williams had a feud and killed Donovan Thomas. Your Honor, what the evidence would really show if we kept going to trial, and I could tell you that Mr. Adams and I never thought we'd be in front of this honorable court. We always thought it would go all the way through trial. Was the state is saying that Rich Homie Quan and Jeffrey Williams don't speak since the fall, and they have a bad relationship the fall of 2014. We would have shown, and we served on the state, December 15, 2014, Jeffrey Williams in a private plane with Mr. Lamar or Rich Homie Quan, and they are high-fiving and laughing with each other. That is on audio video. There's a man who the state hasn't called yet, Mr. Martinez Arnold, also known as Duke. It's on the state's witness list. He's represented by the Honorable Ashley Merchant. He's on that plane as well. He would have identified the item, and he would have testified that Mr. Williams and Mr. Lamar were very close in December 2014. Then on December 29th of 2014, Mr. Williams, Mr. Rich Homie Quan, Mr. Arnold, others were at Brian Williams' home in Miami, Florida. There is a posting by Mr. Lamar, Rich Homie Quan, and a picture of Mr. Arnold and Mr. Lamar, and they say, Mr. Lamar says, "This is my number one man, Duke," or something to that effect. We would have put that into evidence. In addition to that, Your Honor, on December 8th, 2 days before Mr. Thomas, God forbid, was killed, Mr. Williams is with Mr. Thomas, as well as Mr. Sledge and Brian Williams in Brian Williams' tour bus outside of a fabulous entertainer, artist, Mr. Clifford Harris, T.I.'s studio, and at that time, they were very close. But you also have the detective with the gang unit, Detective Underwood. I asked her within the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks, did you do any, and she was on the gang unit the entire time, including today. And I asked her, do you have any evidence about Mr. Williams and Mr. Thomas being close friends? And she said, yes. Of course, I knew that. I said, how about in January of 2015, close to the time of Mr. Thomas's death? She said, yes, they were close friends. Mr. Michael Sprinkle, he's a deputy district attorney in the Fulton County DA's office. He has a recording with Mr. Treadwell. You've heard the name O.G. Bentley. And in that, they're going through the evidence. And Mr. Treadwell, it's important because he has a child, too, actually, with Mr. Thomas's sister. He's family. And Mr. Sprinkle states this is 2018, this is after the rental car, this is after all of the interviews of Mr. Copeland, this is after the interviews of Mr. Zachary. Mr. Sprinkle's in some of those interviews with Mr. Zachary. Mr. Sprinkle on tape, on recording, states, I do not know why anybody thinks Jeffrey Williams is involved in this killing. He and Donovan Thomas were close friends. It makes no sense to anyone. And Mr. Williams was never arrested, never charged, even in this, as the court just noted, with anything to do with Donovan Thomas's, God forbid, killing. In addition to that, Donovan Thomas has a place that he used to stay with a group of people on Auburn Avenue. Jeffrey Williams performed and did a music shoot there to try to help other people who are suffering in poverty to get out and to be able to be seen and to broadcast their music. Jeffrey Williams does that for everybody because he comes, Your Honor, from the struggle of total poverty, seeing people killed. He saw his brother die right in front of him, and the law enforcement, I'm not blaming anybody, everybody's on edge, but law enforcement would not get any help for him because there are all these people around. It is just, what Mr. Williams has gone through is wrong for everyone. It's not just Mr. Williams, it's that whole community, but he's trying to get people out of poverty and out of that community. I have been with Mr. Williams, where we have gone to speak with children together, and he tells them, don't be a rapper. Be like Brian, be a lawyer, keep in school. He tells his children, get your education. His family, his whole being, Your Honor, is trying to break the chains of poverty for others, and it has been spun in this courtroom with false statements and allegations against Mr. Williams at every turn. In addition to that, Your Honor, the state talks about the fact that Mr. Williams takes people to Miami. You would have heard evidence if we went forward. I put all these people on my witness list. Not one person on my witness list has been interviewed by law enforcement or the prosecution. They have investigated this case for 15 years. They haven't interviewed all these people. That Sprinter van that you heard about, that was already booked days before. Going to Miami, Florida, Mr. Williams and Mr. Brian Birdman Williams, they did a video shoot for a music video. If anybody would have gone further with the expert for the state, they would have seen that Mr. Williams' cell phone does not contact any of the co-defendants that are named here in Miami, and Mr. Williams stays at a separate location than any of those persons. He would always take people who can't afford it on airplanes, on buses, on tours, to his concerts. He let everyone go because, Your Honor, they never left that area. He wanted to show people you have an opportunity. The world is big. Mr. Williams gave jobs to everybody who'd want to work. He'd give them jobs and security, and I'm not insulting them. They really weren't their jobs, but they were being mentored, but they were given titles and tried to give them respect and opportunity. But if they did not wish to work, Mr. Williams would not allow them to work with them. This has all been turned on its head by the state. The fact that the state has put in Mr. Williams' lyrics are offensive. Mr. Williams has tens of thousands of recordings. On our witness list, we are bringing in all of his people, his recording artists, his engineers, his managers, his record label, and an expert, the Honorable Dr. Eric Nielsen, to talk about how Mr. Williams creates his music. His music is then changed around and merged. Mr. Williams, some of the lyrics you just heard are not even uttered by Mr. Williams. The state has no idea when these lyrics were made. Some of them were made before the shooting of Donovan Thomas that the state is saying this applies to the Donovan Thomas killing with the Tahoe. They are so far afield of where we need to be when we are trying to, God forbid, take somebody's liberty, Your Honor. The state is talking about things like F the judge and I rep my life for real. That's not even said by Mr. Williams. But they don't care to find out. They are on a tunnel vision to try to convict a man who should not be convicted. The statement about I never killed nobody, but I got something to do with that body. If the state just bothered to talk with anybody, that is a Nicki Minaj song with Jeffrey Williams. It is written by Nicki Minaj. That is on the text messages I gave, not the text message, the Instagram or Twitter rather, that I gave to the state. That is out well before this, but the state doesn't care. This is out in 2015 or 16 or 17 or 18, I can't remember, I think 18, where Mr. Williams was asked who wrote anybody, and his response is anybody who's written by Nicki Minaj, and it was. But it was really written and sung, it's a takeoff of a song by Tupac. There's a song that it parallels, which is an inspiration. But here we are with the state. Also, I never killed nobody, but I got something to do with the body. The next line comes up is, it's a truancy body. The state can't explain that, so they just conveniently leave it out. Your Honor, there were wiretaps on this case. Mr. Williams, it was going to come out, there was an application to wiretap his phone. The state never presented to a judge. That speaks volumes. The leader of the YsL criminal street gang, who's been involved from 2012 until his arrest, and even according to the state while we sit here, they never even tried to wiretap his phone. It might have been because they don't really know what his phone number is. So all these communications you're being told about with Mr. Huey, I'm not so sure the state could have gotten anybody to say that's Mr. Williams' phone. This is how the trial has gone for us. But we sit here for almost 2 years since we did our jury selection initiation on January 4th, 2023. Mr. Williams has been sitting in a jail since May 9th, 2022. This is 2.5 years waiting for the conclusion of the state's case and a verdict from the jury, and that's why he is tendering this plea. I'm telling the court this, and the court knows when you came out the first time, it's very hard for Mr. Williams. I am not supportive of what we're doing right now. I'm not against it. But I told Mr. Williams, you okay with me saying this? Yes. I told Mr. Williams that I think we're winning the trial and we should go to verdict. But he told me I can't wait another 3 months if there is any possibility I could go home because I have children that are hurting. I have things to do, and he has some medical issues that he would like to tend to. He eats out of a bag, Your Honor. He eats processed food only. He gained 75 pounds during trial. He's lost it since. But it is hard. You know, for me, it's only 3 more months. It's enjoyable, actually. I enjoy coming. It's not that enjoyable for Mr. Williams. He told me he wakes up. Can I say this? Yes. He wakes up every day, and it's another day in HE blank blank. Your Honor, the state is talking about, in this case, they put in social media. This honorable court was not here, but the state put in that Mr. Williams, in the indictment, Mr. Williams put out a call for murder. He put $24 million murder for hire on a person's head. That is a lot of money, and that is awful. If they would have read the chat, the Instagram chat, Mr. Williams, right above it, there's a picture of a very well-known, very accomplished musical artist who actually had surgically implanted in his forehead a pink diamond worth $24 million that day. That's what Mr. Williams would talk about. That's the type of evidence that is coming from the state of Georgia in this case. It is wrong. This is all wrong. And I know we're pleading guilty, and I know we're pleading nolo, and I know we're asking this honorable court for a certain sentence, and we'll get to it with the court's permission. But this is the type of evidence that there is. But it is holding this man hostage. And that's not really what we're supposed to do, district attorney time, in the state of Georgia or anywhere. The state then, because I opened on that, then they never bothered to put in all of the chats. Why did it take me to read the chats? In addition to that, going back to Donovan Thomas, talk about Mr. Williams involved, the state did a geofence. A geofence tracks his devices. It doesn't have to be a phone. It could be an iPad. It could be any type of electronic device that targets and is used. You don't have to be on the phone. It's the contact. If he has an app open, it'll capture it. And the state targeted the McDonald's, where they keep saying that Mr. Williams met with people there. They targeted the barbershop where, God forbid, the killing occurred. And they targeted a third location, no, 2 locations. And it comes out, Mr. Williams' devices are not there. It's exculpatory. I don't get that information. I got that because I interviewed Lieutenant Crabtree, and the results can't be found, according to prosecution. I did a motion for that. They just can't find it. That is great evidence for Mr. Williams. It would have also shown clearly that when he does go down from his house after getting this call that I'll talk about from Demise McMullen, he's not with these other people. And the expert for the state, the FBI agent who does the telephone analysis, Mr. Williams' phone does not ping off the same tower as a Demise McMullen or a Mr. Copeland or a Mr. Garlington or whomever. The state of Georgia has misrepresented for 2 years in front of this jury. They have hidden evidence. They have violated Brady. They have falsely accused Mr. Williams. Your Honor, saying that Mr. Williams gets that call 7 minutes after, the state said 6, it was 7 minutes after the killing of Donovan Thomas from Demise McMullen. Mr. Williams was already out of his home. Mr. DeMise McMullins is calling Mr. Williams. He's not even there. He's going down to meet with Mr. Kelvin Treadwell, also known as O.G. Bentley. O.G. Bentley was supposed to go to Miami, Florida. They were talking about this deal. And Mr. Williams, that day, he was given another contract. Mr. Williams, by this time, he went from zero money. He is a multimillionaire at the time. He doesn't need the Cleveland Avenue drug deals for $15. He doesn't need the shootings. He wasn't even living in Atlanta since 2018, 19, 20, 21. He came back the very end of 21, 6 months, and he got arrested in May of 2022. In his house, Your Honor, we have everyone on the witness list. There are 12 people living at that house. Mr. Williams opens up any of a car that he has. He'll rent cars for people. Any home he has, he will allow people to live in hotels because people that he knows, unfortunately, are homeless. And he gives them all places to stay, cars to drive around. He is not involved in criminal activity. Mr. Williams just got back in our country. His passport shows it. Right before he was arrested on May 9th of 2022, there were other people in that house with the drugs and the guns. There are people whose the guns are in their names. They were going to come in court and claim the guns. Everybody else was doing as well, but Mr. Williams has entered a guilty plea. I'm not going back on that, but I just want you to know that this case is just wrong to do to somebody with no bond and to hold him hostage. He wants to, you may not do it. He's aware of that. He's aware of that. But the state offered him 15 years on probation. But they keep piling on these conditions. He just said, he made up his mind. He said, I'm just going to go with it. I got to get home. Judge may not let me home, but I'm not doing these conditions and admit that I'm the leader and I'm involved in the killing and my music just promoted everybody to do it. He's not going to do that. So he did not do that. And that's how we wound up here. The state, the night of the killing, people came to Mr. Williams' home. The state tells the court, he said, lay low. What they don't tell you is right after that, he gave money to Mr. Sledge, who said, they're going to kill me. They think I did it. And Mr. Williams said, if you had anything to do with it, I don't want to be with you. And Mr. Sledge said, I just need a hotel room with my children and my bride or my significant other to get to. And Mr. Williams said, be safe, lay low. That's the lay low. In addition to that, Mr. Williams told Mr. Copeland, Mr. Copeland's with the police. Hours after the killing of Mr. Donovan Thomas, Mr. Copeland goes to the police department. Mr. Williams is the person who told him to go. Mr. Copeland said, what do? They're shooting at my house, at my family's house, at my significant other's mother's house. And Mr. Williams said, if you had anything to do with the murder, get out of here. Mr. Copeland denied it. And Mr. Williams said, then go tell the police. Mr. Copeland said, you want me to go to the police? And Mr. Williams said, if you had nothing to do with it, they think you did it, go to the police. In addition to that, Mr. Copeland said, well, I'm going to retaliate. Mr. Williams told him, don't do that. Let 12 handle. That's on recordings. That is on recordings on January 11th of 2015 with Detective Thorpe. Your Honor, as far as Dwayne Carter, a performer known as Lil Wayne, Mr. Williams had no conflict with him. They are friends. We were presenting evidence that right before this shooting of the tour bus is April 26th of 2015. Mr. Williams is performing in New Orleans area. Then that's the area where it's Holly Grove, where Mr. Carter, or Lil Wayne, a performer known as Lil Wayne, comes from. And in order to drum up popularity and interest, people get on the internet and they start what's called rap battles, arguments, feuds. That's what happened here, and you would have heard testimony from Mr. Williams' management that they said, start a rap battle. It'll be better for your career. Mr. Dwayne Carter is aware of that. Mr. Dwayne Carter is interviewed. The state's aware of this. He has interviews after this. Are you mad? What's the real deal with Jeffrey Williams? He states, no. He's great with me. He brought popularity to me. He loves me. He idolizes me, and I love working with him. They did an album together. In 2014, they're in the studio together, making music together. It is all made up that Mr. Williams is involved. Mr. Williams gives a statement. The state refuses to put it in and then stop me, the previous judge, from cross-examining the detective. His name is Racy. He met with Mr. Williams in the DeKalb County Jail on the 15th day of July 2015. Mr. Williams is arrested that day. And there's a long interview. And Mr. Williams waives his right to counsel. He tells them, I'm his lawyer. They say, you don't want to speak to us? You don't have to. He said, well, I'll speak with you. And they asked Mr. Williams these questions. What about Lil Wayne's shooting? He said, it was outrageous. I love him. That's my idol. I love Lil Wayne. How about this battle? He says it's promotion. They asked him about his rap lyrics. It's the only person that the state ever did anything about rap lyrics with. And they asked Mr. Williams, what about the rap lyrics? And he tells them, it's hyperbole. He didn't use that word. He used the word, it's made up. It's rhyming. It's made up. Not like the state is saying that I rap lyrics for real. That's not even Mr. Williams' utterance. Your Honor, the point I'm trying to make to you is what the state of Georgia has presented to this jury in this courtroom the past year has been full of untruths, and they know it. The state says that Mr. Williams had a conflict because he named an album with Dwayne Carter, and Dwayne Carter didn't like that. Dwayne Carter's interviewed. He said, that was one of the nicest things anyone could have done to me. It shows how much he really appreciates me. It shows respect and honor, and I appreciate what he did. The state knows this. With regards to Jimmy Winfrey, what the state did is they put in a recording. It's not Mr. Williams. It's a jail recording, Mr. Winfrey and an unknown person. And an unknown person